Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you today. It's great to be in person today, so thank you. And thanks to Corey, Peter, Carl Koster, and everyone at Industrial Liaison Program and Corporate Relations for making it possible for us to do this together and to really think about innovation, R&D, resilience of the enterprise that we're all excited to create together. This feels like a terrific step forward, thinking about where we were a year ago. So I'm going to take us back much further than a year ago. You are in Kendall Square now. You may feel that. You may get a chance to walk around later today or tomorrow, and thank you for bringing a beautiful fall day with you. So this is the Kendall Square of about a year ago. Even these letters have since been repainted because of all of the changes that are going on in the region. But to appreciate what Kendall Square is today and what that means to MIT's innovation, our engagement with industry, technology, and thinking about that tech transfer out of MIT and into the world, we have to take a little bit of a step back. So just to understand my very unique role at MIT, first and foremost, I'm an engineer. I love engineering research, whether it's about materials or biological applications of those materials. So I'm an engineer at heart. I love to teach it. I love to do it. I love to work with companies to bring those ideas to life. But my administrative role, and that's really what I'll be talking with you about today, is to think about very different things. And I think there's a benefit to being an engineer and thinking about these things, but certainly very, very different than, for example, cell therapy manufacturing, which is one of my research areas. First, I think about campus space. So I have to actually think about the real estate of MIT. And I don't mean at all the real estate investment. There are other professionals who do that for a living. I think about the space where MIT conducts its research, how we engage with industry when they visit, how we engage with each other, and how we take those ideas out of the campus proper. I also think deeply about industry engagement, in part because one of my roles, and this is one in which I work closely with Carl Koster in corporate relations, is how do we engage industry? When a company, whether large or small, is interested in connecting with the many great researchers at MIT. David shared with you just a slice of what's going on in computing and the ethics of that, but that's a tiny slice of what MIT does. How do we engage with companies effectively? And part of that is thinking about strategic alliances and technology transfer. And that can be in the, let's say, traditional sense of licensing IP, but it's often in terms of brainstorming ideas and partnerships that make more sense to do together than individually. Groups of companies working to move a particular idea forward, or groups of researchers at MIT that might not have obvious connections, but together really help move the needle forward for one company. I also think about that academic research enterprise. So MIT's lifeblood is our research that is always fundamental, always publishable, but can actually be very practical in its applications. And those of us who enjoy being on the faculty at MIT and working with the students, the research staff, this is what we love about the research, that it has the chance, it's motivated, it's supposed to make a better world. Right? It is not for us. It is not just for papers. It is to get out there and make the world better. And then finally, how do I think about that and bring that back to my own lab, my own research group? And unlike many of us at MIT, my research group is not only within the confines of the campus. I have a research group in Cambridge that partners with my research group in Singapore through an alliance that MIT has with Singapore. And so we do research all over the world. I love it because it actually gives me the opportunity to have a 24/7 research enterprise, right, without overtaxing any one individual. All right, so to appreciate how MIT does that and why we do it, why we love doing it, we have to take a look back at history. So I hope you enjoy this historical document brought to us by the MIT Archives and Libraries. This is a real plate. What I love about it is it's an early depiction of MIT. It says at the bottom right, study number 7, not final. MIT is never final, and I'll show you how it's grown over the years. But this was the original vision. It was called New Technology. What became what we now call MIT was the new technology that was going to be across the Harvard Bridge never renamed the MIT Bridge, and there's lots of jokes as to why that was. But across from Boston, where MIT originally started, could we start a new thing? And could that thing be in the heart of industry on purpose? And so the idea was to move MIT out of Boston and into Cambridge, across the river, face Boston. And much of what we do today shows that the wisdom of doing that. And if you look at the notes at the top of, okay, what were the original thinkers about the physical manifestation of MIT thinking? First of all, lots of light and excellent ventilation with tempered and filtered air. Very prescient for today's times. And our buildings still continue to be built and aspire to that. Maximum economy, maximum resistance to decay and wear. So MIT was always thinking about resiliency in how we built the campus, and that translates to how we have resiliency of innovation today. Now, what you may not know, while the final building that we call the Bosworth building, the main group of campus, the iconic Goodwill Hunting building, doesn't look exactly as depicted as in this drawing. It was intended to have water come all the way up to those columns and the dome to basically flood what we now call a Killian courtyard. So aspects of that are not realized, but the main intent to have maximum economy and cross-flow of ideas remains. So this is how that campus looked by the time we got to about 1920. So MIT started 1865. These buildings were built in the early 1900s. And so this layout that you're seeing is the realization of that maximum economy and maximum resiliency, where many different departments of science, engineering, architecture, planning were all co-located in a single building, so there would be constant proximity and mixing of ideas. That was the heart of the design. And while we started out with a relatively small footprint facing the river, over the next 2 decades, there was some growth primarily in the housing. So this used to be a commuting school. As people spent more and more time here, people started to live on the campus, and so we started to see that growth of the campus. And then, of course, after World War II, a huge investment in the research and technology that academia would offer to the country and to the world. And so that led to great growth in the campus buildings, as well as some beautiful architectural examples on the campus, including our Kresge music performance theater. As we move into the 1980s, there's continued growth. And what you see is we're moving into the industrial part of Cambridge proper. So we're part of the city, and we continue to move into the city and partner with the city as we grow. So a lot of the factories, a lot of the shipping activity, a lot of the port activity of Cambridge receded and was replaced by innovation of a different type, many times using the old buildings. So when you walk around MIT, you wouldn't be surprised that some of our cutting-edge research is done in buildings that used to be soap factories or chocolate factories, and they're adapted and repurposed for a very different use today. As we move into the 2000s, we grow even more, and the industry is changing more with which we interact. And as we move closer to the current day, you can see the growth of MIT's physical presence in Cambridge as the world has changed in terms of the kinds of things that MIT studies, conducts research with, engages with industry. So you start to see in that range of decades the growth of biotech, the growth of computing, but never eliminating the strengths of MIT in the past, just adapting and changing them. So this is what MIT looks like today in a photographic view. It's that triangle shape of the campus, but growing and growing and increasingly integrating with the city. Now, one point about resiliency, you can actually think about it, of course, from a sustainability lens in the campus. We are an urban campus. We are on a river. And we actually are very close to the ocean. And so we think a lot about that campus being resilient, not just over the past many years, but also in the decades to come. And we have research in that area that has been able to actually predict stormwater resilience and flooding models that are tied in and shared with the city of Cambridge. And so that partnership is being part of the city, very much part of our research ethos as well. But what you may be more familiar with is the large number of companies that have sprung up or been drawn to Kendall Square over the many years. And this map itself is dated. It doesn't include the companies that have moved in around campus over the past 4 years. So even in this map, what you see is the red is MIT, and I showed you how MIT itself grew over many decades. And then the different colors of buildings here are the different kinds of companies that have moved around MIT. And why have they moved? Or why have they been born in Cambridge or moved to Cambridge or put their business development operations or their research in Cambridge? It's because of that same proximity that went into MIT's original building. Right? So the idea was by bringing people closer together to have those unexpected interactions about research and science, you will be able to make new discoveries. And if you connect with those who are experts in history or planning or philosophy, not just science and technology, not only industry, then you'll be able to do that in an ethical way that builds on itself. And so that's what's reflected here. You can see that that turquoise color is what we would call the biopharma tech industry. And of course, you can find quotes all over that say Kendall Square is actually the heart of biomedical research or the center of the universe or any kind of hyperbole you want. Given that that's my own area of research, I do believe that to be true. It is a wonderfully vibrant place to work. But it's really because of that proximity and that interaction among people. Sitting at coffee shops, coming to MIT, meeting at the companies, that back and forth for that relationship building helps one idea lead to another. And I think that's a very important part of what continues to be the attraction. But that's not the only attraction. Companies who work in energy, in materials, in consumer products, in a range of spaces continue to want to interact with MIT, increasingly by moving closer. And that's because it's not just MIT, of course, it's the connection to Boston, the wider world, the finance sector, the range of universities besides MIT that complement our strengths. So I'll just give you a few examples in closing about the kinds of things that are going on at MIT now that are examples of that. First, there's the MIT IBM Watson AI Lab. That was started a few years ago with IBM down the street from MIT, sponsoring research at MIT in a range of AI topics. And that's become a very, very vibrant relationship, connecting back to some of what you heard in David's talk about the college. There's also the Science Hub with MIT and Amazon, just launched this year, also thinking about AI, but in the context of robotics. But it's not just computing. It's also the hardware, the technology that drives that forward. So we have a new quantum science and engineering consortium that has a range of thought leaders and researchers in that space. And then when you think about, well, in this new world of urban development and moving people and things around the world, what about mobility? And that's a multidisciplinary initiative that requires lots of thinkers outside of engineering and science. And that's being led out of our School of Architecture and Planning, engaging many companies. In the pharma and the biotech area, we remain, of course, very interested and collaborative with companies like Biogen, Takeda, Philips, all thinking about different parts of how to build their strengths by connecting with MIT's strengths. And then many companies increasingly thinking about, well, I might not be a climate and sustainability company. That's not in my business plan. But of course, I want to be a responsible corporate entity. And so we have an MIT Climate and Sustainability Consortium designed to bring companies together who want to move the needle on climate and sustainability just because they're a part of the world, not because that's their primary business area, and connections with lots of forward-thinking materials companies. And then MIT has helped to co-found several different entities that are really broad-reaching. Landmark Bio was announced last year to create a space for good manufacturing practice production of new kinds of medicines, for example, cell and gene therapy, right here down the street from MIT. And Advanced Functional Fibers and Fabrics of America is a Manufacturing USA Institute. So thinking about how can we actually create new kinds of textiles for a range of industry sectors. And again, that's down the street, separate from MIT, but MIT helped found that to partner with industry. So these are the kinds of examples. It's not just biotech, it's not just computing, it's not just materials, it's not just energy. There's so many strengths and so many reasons to bring diverse experts together. And MIT is happy to convene that. So as you think about Kendall Square, you will see new buildings going up. This is a constant over the past decade. What I'm showing you here is the Kendall Square initiative that's been going on for about a decade, and most of those buildings you'll be able to walk by today on a beautiful day. When you do, this is the view that you have just down the street from where you are now. You'll see a new graduate housing building, because our researchers, of course, live nearby, and a new building that is occupied by many different companies that work closely with MIT. Some long-established companies, long-term sponsors of research, some who are recent licensees and spinning out some of the technology developed at MIT. And again, it's all about that proximity. So the MIT of tomorrow will continue to evolve. The research, the technology, the innovation, and I'm confident that we'll be resilient in that because we are used to adapting and changing. We expect it, we love it, it's part of what it means to make a better world. And so the next part that you'll see coming out of MIT will be a continued way to engage with the community and with industry. And that's in an area that is currently the Volpe Transportation Center. So you can keep your eye on that sector right behind the building we are in now. That will be another place that involves housing, industry, innovation, community, and of course that proximity to MIT, which I personally find exciting every day that I come to campus. So thank you for spending some time learning about the history of Kendall Square, and I hope you enjoy walking around not just Kendall Square, but the MIT campus in the days to come. Thank you. So one question, which is a very good question, what's the plan for growth in the future when space runs out in Cambridge? Has MIT been thinking of a satellite campus? So that's a great question. Space has always been at a premium, of course. Even when I show you the early days of the 1920s MIT campus, you're always concerned you're going to run out of space because ideas take time, and time takes people, and people take space, right? So that will always be a dynamic here. That's not something that that we should worry will, a problem that will ever go away. In terms of MIT thinking about a satellite campus, I think when you see the value that MIT derives from proximity of people, right, why we really like to be close to one another so we can run into each other, it's not that a satellite campus is impossible, but proximity of people talking about their ideas still feels very important to us culturally. What I will say that we do have are international places where we have specific research focus areas, but we don't think about them as satellite campuses. An example would be what I mentioned in Singapore. We have the Singapore-MIT Alliance for Research and Technology. That's been a multi-decade collaboration with the government of Singapore and MIT, and there's a facility there where we conduct research. But we don't think of that as a place where we also do teaching. It's not a little MIT. It's a purpose-driven collaboration because there's research that's really terrific and appropriate to do in that part of the world. So that's how we tend to think about our collaborations, whether it's within the US or within the international space. What we will do is continue to make sure the space has an economy of personal interaction, just as we did in the original building. All right, thank you.